This is the M2 light tank. It's a tank that basically set the stage for America's armored forces in World War II, but didn't stick around for the main show. Why is that the case? Let's find out, shall we? The M2 light tank was an American-made light tank that was first introduced to the world in 1936. While most tanks of that time were designed for direct combat, the M2 had a slightly different purpose. You see, the M2 saw a relatively limited service and usage during World War II. The only combat service that this tank has had was with the United States Marine Corps' 1st Tank Battalion in 1942 during the Pacific War. The M2 light tank originated from the T2 light tank prototype, which was built by Rock Island Arsenal. The T2 initially had a less effective suspension system called Vickers-type leaf spring, but in 1935 it was upgraded to a vertical volute suspension system, which was better. This improved version had the name of T2E1. In 1936, this version was slightly modified and was produced as the M2A1. The M2 class had a history of improvements and renovations. The second version of this tank, the M2A2, became the primary tank for the U.S. Army during the interwar period, the period between World War I and World War II, to be more clear. The M2A2 had a problem, however. It was a light tank, which meant that it wasn't equipped with huge guns. It only carried machine guns. The Spanish Civil War demonstrated that tanks armed with only machine guns weren't effective. In response, the M2A4 model was introduced, which was equipped with a 37mm cannon as its main weapon. It's estimated that the United States made a total of 375 M2A4 tanks, with the last ones being delivered as late as April 1942. Fun fact, each unit cost the U.S. approximately $25,000 to build, or about $500,000 in today's money. Let's now take a closer look at the design aspect of things. The M2 light tank may appear compact by modern standards. At 14 feet 6 inches long and 8 feet 1 inch wide, it was about the size of an oversized SUV, though far more intimidating with its armor and firepower, I am sure. She had a maximum height of 8 feet 8 inches tall, and it was operated by 4 crew members. You had the commander, loader, gunner, driver, and co-driver all working together in this mobile fortress. The M2 Light weighed around 12 tons, which is about half the size of a common tank used in World War I and World War II. This was due to several factors: lighter armor, smaller engine, small chassis, and on top of that, it was only equipped with light machine guns and a small cannon. If we're talking, of course, about the newer M2A4 units. You see, the main goal of Rock Island Arsenal, the manufacturers of this design, was to have a fast tank that was capable of accomplishing reconnaissance and support roles. At the time, tanks like the M2 were pretty small compared to the heavyweights of World War II. But don't be fooled by the small size. This tank played a crucial role in developing the tactics and technology used in later, more powerful tanks like the famous Sherman. The M2 had a maximum speed of 36 miles per hour, so it had the capability of doing fast and sneaky maneuvering whenever it needed. The design of the M2 light tank directly influenced the design of the M3 Stuart, one of the most widely used American light tanks in World War II. The M3 took many of the M2's good features, but added better armor and a more powerful cannon, improving on the design for actual combat in a nutshell. With that being said, you might be wondering how this bad boy performed in battle scenarios. Well, to put it clearly, the M2 light tank units didn't participate too much in direct combat against the Axis powers during World War II. You see, as we said earlier, the blueprint design and the vision behind building a tank like this was to scout on the enemy, support combat personnel, and preserve supply lines. Plus, the costly price of making a single M2 unit was a little bit too much. Although the M2 light tank was innovative for its time, by the outbreak of World War II, it was quickly becoming outdated. I mean, take a look at the German Panzer III tank, for example. Nothing can be further said. On the contrary, however, the American M2 did see some action in the early stages of the war, particularly during the 1941 to 1942 period, with the main mission of scouting and protecting supply lines. The U.S. military used this tank to train newbie tank crew members, so they can eventually move on to more advanced vehicles like the M3 Stuart or M4 Sherman. Think of it as a stepping stone for the tank force, an element that would help the US and the Allied forces defeat the Germans in their own game. Blitz attacks and fast maneuvers. So there you have it, folks. That was the story of the M2 light tank, an unforgettable gem and America's vast military treasure. That's one way to put it, I guess.